Ibrahim Traoré never liked eating in silence. Even at the presidential palace, his dinners felt more like a war room than a meal. Plates pushed aside for files, ministers whispering plans between mouthfuls of rice. That night was no different, except it would be his last normal night for a very long time. "Mr. President, the Northern Water Project is ready for your inspection," said Minister Kabore, tapping at his leather folder. Traoré lifted his fork, spearing a piece of grilled chicken. "Good. After that, the mining contract renegotiation. We're not here to feed France anymore." A few loyal aides chuckled politely. The president swallowed, but something clung to his throat. Sharp, metallic, then a burn. Then the heat spread down his chest like acid. He dropped the fork. A glass shattered. "Mr. President?" Kabore's voice blurred. Traoré's vision flickered. The table, the lights, the shocked faces. Then darkness, like a velvet curtain closing too soon. In a sealed medical wing minutes later, a young doctor whispered to the chief of security, Ouedraogo, "It's poison, fast, but not instantly lethal. He has hours." Ouedraogo didn't blink. "Lock down the palace, no one in, no one out." Outside the hospital, panic bled into the streets. Word spread faster than any official statement. A hashtag rose like a prayer. #, pray for Traoré. Inside, men in crisp suits argued under flickering fluorescent lights. "We need someone to lead this investigation, someone no one trusts," said Ouedraogo. Prime Minister Dio's eyes narrowed. "There's only one man Traoré would hate to owe his life to." Silence fell. The name tasted bitter in every mouth. Maurice Sankara, the traitor who once ran the country's secrets, until Traoré locked him away. At that exact moment, in a modest house under constant surveillance, Sankara sat listening to static on an old radio. He lit a cigarette with steady hands. When the knock finally came, he didn't flinch. Outside, a convoy of black cars waited under a starless sky. The car ride to the military hospital felt like a coffin on wheels. Maurice Sankara sat in the back, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the passing city lights. Ouagadougou, the city he once watched from hidden cameras and informant reports. Tonight, it felt foreign. Or maybe he did. Next to him, a young security officer, barely old enough to shave, cleared his throat. "Sir, do you want water? Or—" "Save your kindness," Sankara cut him off, his voice like gravel. "You're only polite because you think I'm about to save your precious president." The boy fell silent. When they pulled up to the hospital entrance, Sankara stepped out first, ignoring the cluster of armed guards who stiffened as he passed. They still saw a traitor. Let them. Fear was useful. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and panic. Prime Minister Dio, Security Chief Ouedraogo, and Interior Minister Kabore waited by the door to the secured ward. Kabore's lips tightened as if he'd swallowed a bad secret. "Mr. Sankara, thank you for coming." Sankara barked a humorless laugh. "Thank me when he wakes up, or curse me when he doesn't." Without waiting for permission, he pushed past them into the private room. Ibrahim Traoré lay hooked up to blinking machines, skin pale, lips cracked. He looked nothing like the firebrand soldier who once called Sankara's methods outdated and exiled him overnight. Sankara stood at the bedside for a full minute before speaking. When he did, it was almost to himself. "You're strong, boy. You survived my purges. You survived their assassins. And now you survive your own arrogance." Traoré's eyelids fluttered, half-conscious. A rasp escaped his dry throat. "Maurice! Betrayal!" Sankara leaned closer, so only the machines could hear him. "Yes. There's always betrayal, and tonight, old enemy, I'll find it for you. Not because I care if you live, but because I hate seeing my country ruled by cowards." He turned back to the door. Dio and Ouedraogo stood blocking his path, hungry for answers. "Who did this?" Ouedraogo asked. Sankara's eyes narrowed. "Everyone is guilty until I say otherwise. Ministers, guards, chefs, even you two." Dio stiffened. "You have full authority, but we need calm." Sankara cut him off with a wave of his hand. "You need results. Calm is for sheep. I need the kitchen staff, security logs for the past 2 weeks, and unrestricted access to palace surveillance. And keep this quiet. If whoever did this knows I'm involved, they'll panic and vanish." Ouedraogo opened his mouth to protest, then thought better of it. He only nodded. Outside the ward, Sankara paused. He glanced once more at Traoré, fighting poison in his veins. 2 enemies, bound now by a bigger enemy in the dark. Sankara lit another cigarette as he stepped into the night. Time to hunt. At dawn, the east wing of the presidential palace turned into a war room, but instead of soldiers with rifles, there were chefs, waiters, guards, and secretaries lined up like suspects in a crime novel. Maurice Sankara stood at the center, a wolf among anxious sheep. He flipped through a folder thicker than a Bible. Staff lists, security shifts, meal prep logs. He didn't trust any of it. "Mr. Sankara, the head chef is ready for questioning," said one of his old loyalists, an aging officer named Tapsoba, the only man he still called comrade. "Bring him in, and keep him sweating." A portly man in a crisp white coat shuffled forward. Chef Bamana had fed 3 presidents. His hands trembled now as Sankara circled him. "Chef," Sankara said softly, almost kindly, "you've served this palace longer than most of these guards have been alive. So tell me, which one of your loyal staff wants to see our president in the ground?" Bamana stammered, voice cracking like an old radio. I swear, sir. All ingredients come from the palace farm. All meals are tasted before they reach His Excellency. Tasted? Yes, but by whom?" The chef swallowed hard. "Suli, sir, Suli Main, one of my most trusted servers." "And where is Suli?" A long silence. Eyes darted to the floor. He didn't show up this morning. I sent men to his quarters. Gone. No trace." Sankara slammed the folder shut. The sound made 2 guards flinch. "He's dead," Sankara said flatly, "or halfway to a foreign border by now. Find his family, friends, drinking buddies, anyone who owes him money. Squeeze them." Tapsoba scribbled notes, barking orders into a radio. One young officer raised a hand timidly. "Sir, the security cameras—" "Show me," Sankara snapped. In a small room filled with flickering monitors, Sankara squinted at a grainy feed from 3 nights before. There, the back garden behind the kitchens. Zoom, enhance. A shadowy figure, Suli, and another man. A handshake, an envelope. "Pause," Sankara ordered. He leaned closer. Recognition flickered across his face. He whispered the name like a curse. "Hamidou Ouedraogo," Tapsoba frowned. "Foreign Relations Advisor?" Sankara exhaled smoke through his nose. "Traoré's pet diplomat, always bragging about trips to Paris, private consultations, and now he's paying off a food server in the dark?" Tapsoba's eyes widened. "Want him brought in, sir?" Sankara's lip curled into something almost like a smile. "Number, not yet. Let him think he's safe. A cornered rat bites. We watch. We listen. Then we crush him." He tapped the frozen image on the screen. A waiter, a whisper, an envelope, tiny cogs in a bigger machine. A hidden coup was unfolding, and the 2 men who hated each other most were now its only threat. Hamidou Ouedraogo always prided himself on being invisible when he needed to be. A good diplomat, he believed, was equal parts ghost and mirror. Say nothing, repeat everything, and make powerful men think their secrets were safe. But that morning, as he paced inside his corner office lined with imported books he'd never read, the calm he wore like a suit of armor was cracking. He hadn't heard from Suli Main in days. The envelope exchange was supposed to be a harmless insurance policy, a poison that wouldn't kill, just humble the president, make him more reasonable. That's what the French handler had promised. Now Suli had vanished. The entire palace was on lockdown, and worst of all, Maurice Sankara was back. Ouedraogo peeked through his blinds and nearly jumped when he saw 2 men in dark suits standing at the end of the hallway. Sankara's hounds. They pretended to check a window lock, but Ouedraogo wasn't fooled. He knew a tale when he saw one. His phone buzzed. A single encrypted message blinked on screen. Pierre needs confirmation. Is it done? Sawadogo's hand shook as he typed back. The president is dying. Will update. Need extraction plan. Before he could hit send, a soft knock broke his panic. Mr. Sawadogo? Said a polite voice. It was Tapsoba, Sankara's loyal bulldog. Sawadogo pocketed the phone so quickly it almost clattered to the floor. Yes, Major. To what do I owe this pleasure? Tapsoba didn't smile. Mr. Sankara requests your presence. Just a few questions. Routine, he says. Sawadogo forced a grin so wide it hurt. Of course. Anything for our national security. Tapsoba's eyes didn't blink. This way, sir. Down the hallway, in a shuttered meeting room, Sankara sat alone. A single folder rested before him. No guards, no audience. Just him and an empty chair waiting for the liar. As the door opened, Sankara didn't even look up. Mr. Sawadogo, sit. Sawadogo obeyed, his mind racing for excuses, for distractions, for anything. Sankara flicked ash into a glass tray, eyes still on his folder. I hear you've been helpful. Traveling for the state, whispering for the state, spending the state's money. A bead of sweat crawled down Sawadogo's temple. I serve only Burkina Faso, sir. You know that. Sankara finally lifted his gaze. It was the look of a man who'd built his life dismantling other men's lies. Then you won't mind telling me why you were paying my missing waiter in the garden. Sawadogo's mouth opened. No words came out. Sankara leaned back, voice soft, almost gentle, the tone of a butcher petting a lamb. Relax, Hamidou. I don't want your blood. I want your boss. You tell me who owns you, and maybe you get to keep that fancy house in Paris. Sawadogo's lips trembled. He looked at the door as if it might save him. It wouldn't. For a man who spoke 5 languages at cocktail parties, Hamidou Sawadogo suddenly couldn't find words in any of them. Sankara waited. He let the silence crawl across the small room, coil itself around Sawadogo's chest until the man squirmed like a pinned insect. Finally, Sawadogo's voice cracked. I only did what I was told, for the good of our foreign relations. Sankara's laugh was a low, sharp bark. Foreign relations? You mean your Paris bank account, Hamidou? Don't insult me. He slammed a file on the table. Inside, printouts, wire transfers, a photo of Sawadogo smiling on a sunny street in Montmartre with a man whose face was carefully circled in red. Sankara pushed it closer. Pierre Dumont, the cultural attaché who paid you to poison the president. Sawadogo's eyes widened. His shoulders slumped in defeat. I didn't want him dead. They said it would only weaken him, humble him, make him sign the agreements. Sankara cut him off with a flick of his cigarette. And while he choked on his own blood, you'd sell our gold mines back to France, restore the base contract, keep your nice seat at the Paris club. A tear slid down Sawadogo's cheek, absurdly delicate for a man who had sold out a nation. Sankara's tone changed. Softer now, the voice of the interrogator who knew when to offer false comfort. Listen, Hamidou, you can still crawl out of this grave. Tell me where Dumont is, how he'll make contact. Sawadogo hesitated, glancing at the locked door behind Sankara's shoulder. You can't protect me from them, he whispered. They'll kill me. Sankara leaned forward until they were almost nose to nose. His voice dropped to a viper's hiss. I don't care about you living, Hamidou. I care about Traoré living. And if you die after you're useful, well, better than before. A broken sob escaped Sawadogo's throat. He wiped it with a shaking sleeve. They're waiting for confirmation. They think Traoré is finished. Dumont will come personally to finalize the new contracts when he's sure the power shift is done. He always stays at the old colonial residence, the one near the river. He trusts it. Sankara smiled, cold and victorious. Good. Very good. He rose from his chair, lit a fresh cigarette, and paused by the door. Oh, one last thing. Sawadogo looked up, hope flickering weakly. If you lie to me, I won't have to kill you. He leaned in. voice deadly calm. The people outside will. Outside the room, Tapsoba waited, arms folded. Sankara emerged with a ghost of a grin. Put a shadow on every exit of that colonial house, quietly. When Dumont lands, I want him breathing and begging. Tapsoba saluted. And the traitor? Sankara exhaled smoke. Let him pray for forgiveness. If he's lucky, Traoré will be too busy living to care about revenge. A nurse rushed past them, chart in hand. For the first time in days, her eyes held a spark of good news. Mr. Sankara, the president, he's awake. Sankara crushed his cigarette under his heel, a rare warmth flickering behind his cold eyes. Showtime. Ibrahim Traoré's first conscious breath tasted like metal and old anger. Tubes pressed against his throat. A hiss of machines keeping rhythm with his ragged heartbeat. He forced his eyes open. The ceiling above him, the same white hospital tiles he'd ordered budget cuts for, thinking he'd never need them. Ironic. The room blurred, a silhouette resolved beside the bed, a man in a gray suit, older, watchful, Sankara, of all people. Traoré's voice scraped out, raw but commanding. You. Sankara didn't flinch. He had faced firing squads with less fear. Yes, Mr. President, still alive, no thanks to your kitchen staff. Traoré tried to sit up but winced. Pain bit into his chest like a dog. Who did this? Sankara shrugged as if discussing the weather. A chain of cowards. But the hand feeding them? France. They sent Dumont, your good friend Hamidou's real boss. Traoré's lips curled into a bitter smile. Even poisoned, betrayed, half dead. The fire in him burned clean. How deep? Sankara leaned closer, voice dropping to an intimate growl. They wanted you weak enough to sign over the mines, the military base, the sovereignty you keep screaming about in your speeches. They underestimated how much poison you can stomach. Traoré barked a laugh that turned into a cough. Blood dotted his lips, but the grin stayed. And Sawadogo? Spilled everything. He'll live long enough to sign a confession. Maybe. Outside the room, Tapsoba appeared at the glass, gave Sankara a single nod. Dumont is coming. Sankara straightened, eyes gleaming. Dumont thinks you're dying. He's landing tonight to collect his prize. You and we're going to hand him a funeral instead. Traoré's voice dropped to a whisper only Sankara could hear. You and I, two enemies. A slow, wolfish grin spread across Sankara's face. One betrayal bigger than both of us. He offered his hand. It trembled slightly. Age, or maybe something else. Respect. Unspoken. Traoré stared at it for a heartbeat. Then he clasped it, their palms pressing like a pact sealed in blood. Hours later, under the cover of a hushed night, armored convoys rolled unseen to the old colonial residence by the river. Inside one of the vehicles, Traoré leaned back, eyes hard and alive. Beside him, Sankara loaded a silenced pistol. For the first time in years, the old spymaster spoke with genuine warmth. You know, Ibrahim, when this is over, we're still going to hate each other. Traoré smirked, eyes on the dark road ahead. Good. That's how I know I can trust you. The old colonial residence sat on the riverbank like a sleeping ghost. Whitewashed walls, wide verandas, and memories of men who once carved Africa with ink and gunpowder. Tonight, it would witness something new, its last secret meeting. Inside, French cultural attaché Pierre Dumont checked his expensive wristwatch for the third time in 10 minutes. His assistant, a young man with slick hair and jittery hands, whispered nervously in his ear. Sir, are you sure it's safe? This place, no guards, no cameras. Dumont waved him off with a bored flick of his fingers. Relax. The local dogs think Traoré is as good as dead. The Prime Minister will be here soon to sign the revised agreements. By morning, Burkina Faso will be back where it belongs. He smiled thinly, pouring himself a glass of imported scotch. He didn't hear the faint click of a hidden radio signal cutting through the garden hedges outside. In the darkness beyond the villa, Sankara crouched beside Traoré under a fig tree heavy with bats. Through his earpiece, Tapsoba whispered, "Target confirmed inside. No armed guards except his valet. Clear shot if you want him dead, sir." Sankara glanced at Traoré, whose face was pale but iron-set. "Dead is too easy," Traoré murmured. "I want him to feel it, to know the people he mocked just signed his death sentence." Sankara smirked. He checked the silencer on his pistol, then handed Traoré a small recorder. "Keep this on you," he'll brag. "Men like him always do." They moved in silence, ghosts among the vines and crumbling stone columns. Near the back door, Sankara paused, his hand on Traoré's chest. "One last chance. You sure you're strong enough?" Traoré gave him a look so cold it made the night itself shiver. "Open the door, Maurice." Inside, Dumont leaned back in an antique chair, feet up on a colonial-era coffee table. He raised his glass at the approaching footsteps, expecting a trembling prime minister, papers in hand. Instead, the door swung open to reveal the living ghost of a man he thought was rotting in a hospital bed. Ibrahim Traoré stepped in, upright, eyes blazing. "Bonsoir, Monsieur Dumont." Dumont froze mid-sip, his glass tipping, liquor spilling onto his crisp white shirt. This is impossible." Sankara followed, closing the door with a soft click. He leaned against it, pistol visible but lowered. "Oh, it's very possible," Sankara purred. "You really should have checked under the bed before booking your flight." Dumont stammered, eyes darting to his assistant, who was inching backward toward a hidden briefcase under the table. Traoré pointed at him without looking away from Dumont. "Try it, boy, and you'll never walk again." The young man froze, hands in the air. Dumont swallowed hard. "You have no proof. This is an international—" Traoré cut him off, voice a whip crack. "You poisoned my food. You bribed my minister. You insulted my country's right to stand on its own feet. And now you'll confess it to the whole damn world." Sankara tossed the recorder onto the table. The red light blinked like a tiny heartbeat. "Start talking, Monsieur Dumont." Pierre Dumont's lips twitched, searching for the perfect lie, but his eyes betrayed him. He saw it in Traoré's posture. This was no longer the idealistic young captain he'd mocked in embassy cables. This was a man who had survived poison, betrayal, and ghosts in his own palace. This was a lion awake. Sankara cocked his pistol just loud enough to snap Dumont's thoughts back to the suffocating room. "One confession," Sankara purred, "on tape, or the river gets a French diplomat tonight. Your choice." Dumont's assistant whimpered, hands still in the air, sweat dripping down his hairline. Traoré stepped closer, every word like a blade slicing centuries of quiet domination. "You think Africa is your chessboard? You pick leaders, poison rebels, buy ministers like cheap suits in Paris? But tonight," he leaned in, so close Dumont could smell the bitter medicine still clinging to his breath. "Tonight, you get to tell your bosses exactly how you failed." He gestured to Sankara. "Roll it." The recorder's red light blinked. Dumont trembled, licking dry lips. He tried for bravado, a last act for an audience of two enemies turned executioners. "I was ordered by the French Foreign Ministry to ensure Burkina Faso remained aligned with Western interests. We feared Traoré's pivot to Russia, to China, so we offered influence." Traoré's voice dripped disgust. "Influence? You mean gold concessions, military bases, on my people's dignity?" Dumont's shoulders sagged, shame and fear warring across his face. Yes, the poison was meant to weaken, not kill, force a temporary power transition, until new agreements were signed. Sankara grinned like a shark smelling blood. "Perfect. Now, one last thing. Say it clearly. You bribed Sawadogo, and you ordered the poisoning." Dumont closed his eyes, as if a bullet would be kinder. "I bribed Sawadogo. I ordered the poisoning. I betrayed the sovereignty of Burkina Faso." Click. Sankara hit stop. "Good boy," he said softly. The assistant started to bolt for the door, panic overriding common sense, but Traoré was faster. With surprising strength for a man still healing, he slammed him back into an armchair, nose inches from the terrified young face. "Stay," Traoré hissed. "You'll fly back to Paris too. But you'll carry this tape in your luggage. Tell them Burkina Faso belongs to no one." He turned to Dumont, whose fancy suit was soaked in sweat. "You're leaving tonight, Monsieur Dumont, in disgrace. And every word you said here will be broadcast across Africa before you land." Sankara's laugh was low and wicked. "Guess we're both traitors now. You for your flag, me for saving his life." Traoré didn't smile. He looked at Sankara, really looked at him. And for the first time, his eyes held more than old grudges. They held respect. Outside, engines revved. Diplomatic expulsion papers were signed in the moonlight. A coup had failed, and two enemies had won.
The convoy that smuggled Dumont out of Burkina Faso drove under moonless skies. But inside the palace gates, a different storm brewed. News of the betrayal spread faster than any official statement. Soldiers whispered in guarded barracks. Farmers heard it on battered radios. Students replayed leaks on cracked smartphones. One truth burned through every rumor. Traoré had survived because he trusted the last man he should have. In the presidential wing, Ibrahim Traoré stood alone by a window, a glass of plain water in his trembling hand. His reflection stared back, skin paler than before, but eyes harder, deeper. He hadn't just fought poison. He'd fought an old sickness in his own court, cowardice disguised as loyalty. Behind him, a soft knock. Sankara entered without waiting for permission, as if the old rules between them had dissolved in the poison's fire. "You should be resting," Sankara grumbled, dropping a thick folder on the desk. "This isn't over. Dumont's confession is just the beginning." Traoré didn't turn. He sipped his water, voice quiet but sharp. "Then we finish it. You have your old networks, the moles, the foreign accounts, burn them all." Sankara smirked, lighting his eternal cigarette. "You sound like me 10 years ago." Traoré finally turned, a ghost of a grin on his lips. "Perhaps you infected me, old man." A short silence fell, the kind that spoke of enemies who'd become allies, not because they forgave each other, but because neither could stand betrayal worse than their own grudges. Sankara's tone softened, rough with a rare honesty. "You saved this country from my kind once, old men drunk on secrets. Now you'll save it from theirs, foreign suits drunk on power." Traoré stepped closer, eyes boring into him. "I didn't save it alone." Sankara barked a laugh that startled even him. "God help us both, boy. If we keep agreeing, people will think we like each other." Traoré's face turned deadly serious again. "I don't like you, Sankara, but I trust you now." He extended his hand, this time not as a threat, not as a deal, as a pact. Sankara looked at it, then at Traoré's eyes, and clasped it with a firmness that made old betrayals tremble in their graves. Outside, the early sunrise brushed the city's rooftops. In a few hours, Traoré's address to the nation would broadcast Dumont's confession. Ministers would fall. Spies would flee. But for now, in this small room, two men who once wanted each other dead now stood guard over something far bigger than revenge. They stood guard over an idea.
At sunrise, Ouagadougou hummed with a tension that felt more alive than fear. A city holding its breath, waiting to see if the rumors were true. The president was alive. The betrayal was real. And this time, there would be no forgiveness for traitors. In the press hall of the presidential palace, rows of local and foreign journalists fidgeted under ceiling fans that did nothing to push back the stifling heat. Cables snaked across the marble floor. Microphones blinked red. A single podium waited at the front. Behind a thick curtain, Traoré stood tall, a fresh suit hanging loose on shoulders, still recovering from poison's cruel embrace. Next to him, Maurice Sankara adjusted the knot of his old tie. A small ritual that made him look less like a spy and more like a statesman, if only for today. Traoré caught his eye. "You sure you're ready to stand next to me in front of every camera on this continent?" Sankara chuckled, low and rough. "I've stood next to worse men, and unlike them, you didn't pay me to lie." A faint smile ghosted over Traoré's lips. "Try not to look so smug when I expose half your old friends." Sankara flicked ash to the ground. "Try not to faint before you finish your speech." They shared a moment, not of friendship, but of understanding. Two wolves who'd bitten each other enough to know that sometimes a bigger hunt demands a shared throat. A young aide peeked through the curtain, face pale. "Mr. President, they're ready." Traoré stepped forward, shoulders squaring. His voice when he spoke was a blade, clean, sharp, unafraid. "Good. Let them hear the truth. All of it." Minutes later, the world watched live as Ibrahim Traoré laid it bare. The poison, the bribed minister, the foreign hands pulling invisible strings, the confessions, raw and undeniable, no spin, no diplomatic filter, just fire and fact. Behind him, Sankara stood silent, an enemy reborn as a shadow guardian. He watched ministers squirm in their seats, foreign reporters scribble frantic notes, and young soldiers by the door standing straighter than ever before. When Traoré finished, a hush fell so total you could hear the heartbeat of a nation waking up. He didn't end with threats or slogans. He ended with a promise. Never again will Burkina Faso's fate be sold behind closed doors. Not while I breathe. Not while any man beside me loves this country more than he loves his own power. The applause that erupted wasn't polite. It was a roar. Not just for him, but for every unspoken truth that had survived the poison in his veins. That night, on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Traoré and Sankara stood shoulder to shoulder. Below, crowds gathered, chanting his name, but also a name they once cursed, Sankara. Traoré sipped his tea. No testers needed tonight. "You know, old man, we make a dangerous team." Sankara exhaled a long plume of smoke, eyes narrowed at the stars above. "Good. Let the world remember that two enemies can become the nightmare of every betrayer." They didn't shake hands this time. They didn't need to. The untold state they guarded now lived in every soul awake beneath that vast African sky. In the end, it wasn't just poison that threatened President Traoré. It was the silence that makes betrayal possible. But tonight, you and I have witnessed something bigger than politics. We saw how two sworn enemies stood together to expose the hidden hands that feed on a nation's weakness. This is more than a story about Burkina Faso. It's a lesson for every place where power is sold and truth is buried. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, raw, honest, and fearless, hit that subscribe button, share this video, and keep the Untold state alive. Until next time, stay awake, stay questioning, and remember, no secret stays buried forever.